Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me on. It's a real pleasure and honor to be here. My name's Andy Carvel, and I'm the CEO and co-CEO and partner at Feature. We're a mobile growth consultancy based in Berlin. And today I'm going to give a short 15-minute presentation about why mobile subscription optimization is the new gold rush. So briefly about Feature. We're a mobile growth consultancy based in Berlin, as I mentioned. We work with B2C apps and build and execute on mobile growth strategies for our clients. So we can provide a full growth team as a service, including growth marketing, data science, creative design, copy and translation, as well as data engineering and integration help. We're partnering with some of the leading app publishers in the space to help them acquire, engage, monetize, and retain users across their mobile apps. And most of the apps we work with are either already using subscriptions or actively developing them. So the new gold rush. We've seen a massive shift over the last few years towards subscription as the dominant model for app monetization. It's definitely not just streaming apps like Netflix and Spotify these days. There's a huge gold rush right now. Every app is fighting for a share of that recurring revenue. So just to kind of underline that, we've seen publishers like Adobe, I think, who were pretty early on in that, even, outside of mobile, moving their entire software business from selling units of software to selling subscriptions. So they've been a bit of ahead of the curve on this, but we really see this across the board now, across many different verticals. Pretty much every category outside of games is trying subscription as a business model. Subscriptions are really eating the world. Even with games, you've got stuff like Apple Arcade, which is offering an all-you-can-eat game subscription. But in the app space, subscriptions are usually offering, typically one of three types of value. Thomas Petit actually called this out in one of his presentations recently, that typically you can kind of divide most of the app subscriptions into one of three main categories: content, motivation, or utility subscriptions. So on the content side, that might be things like your streaming apps like SoundCloud, for example. Motivation, this would be kind of more like I sometimes call this category lifestyle. So it could include things like fitness apps, meditation apps, that kind of stuff. And then utility, stuff that's actually just providing some general utility, something that's solving a problem for you on an ongoing basis. Things like Adobe Scan would fall into that category, scanner apps, or really just anything that's just sort of solving a utilitarian problem. And it's important to understand the value that your subscription will bring when you're offering that to a user, since it's going to help you tailor the approach across all areas of the life cycle, from subscriber conversion and also down to retention, how you're actually going to be engaging and delivering that value to the user. So like it or not, subscription is the dominant model these days. It's completely eclipsed like single for sale apps and in-app purchases, although we do see some mixed models. So what are the pros and cons? Well, subscription does increase the complexity versus charging users a one-off fee to use the app at the point of installation. You're going to have to think a lot harder about upsell points, when in the user journey to upsell, whether to use a trial. If you have a trial, how long should it be? And you're going to need to work harder to retain users, to stretch out that user lifetime, because you only get paid if they're still going to stay in the subscription. So, it's a different set of challenges to a one-off sale, but, the upside, higher LTV, more predictable revenue, and plus Apple and Google making these subscription features really easy for you to implement, or relatively easy anyway. Generally, what we see is that the pros outweigh those cons. So how should you approach subscription revenue optimization for your app? Well, Feature, we think about subscription optimization pretty holistically, from acquiring the right users and identifying early signals of propensity to subscribe through pricing optimization, conversion to trial onboarding, trial to paid, subscriber retention, and finally subscriber reactivation. And there's a lot of buzzwords. It all starts with getting the proper measurement in place. Subscriptions analytics is actually pretty complex when you factor in cancellations, dynamic pricing, offers, and varied subscription lengths, as well as having the right capabilities to influence your users, i.e. to test new paywalls and personalized flows based on user segmentations that you've identified as being valuable, or just that you're experimenting with to see if you can actually kind of tweak it, by offering a more personalized experience. And that's where CleverTap comes in very useful. Like, it gives you some of those levers and allows you to segment your user base, to test and measure much more effectively than you could do just trying to implement all that in your product natively. So if we think about acquisition, first of all, when it comes to acquiring users who are likely to subscribe, so in other words, acquiring subscribers rather than just users, there's a lot of challenges here. The challenge becomes providing a usable signal in a reasonable amount of time to the ad network, which are, and the ad networks these days, particularly like Facebook, Google, they're black boxes. They're running machine learning algorithms. They want signal on, okay, you tell them very quickly, was this user that they sent you, was this a valuable user? Typically, that's been done with CPA campaigns, cost per action, optimizing towards not just an install, but ideally a subscription, right? But like subscription generally happens after a trial, first of all. Mostly we see that after running free trials, which means that subscription event, when the user like rolls from a free trial into a paid subscription, is happening sometimes 2 weeks, maybe even a month after they've installed the app. Now that's too long for the ad networks to actually do any optimization around this. They can't optimize with those kind of like lead times. So even before iOS 14, which I'll get to in a moment, the challenge has been to try to identify those users who are likely to subscribe based on an earlier event. And typically, publishers have gone with starting a trial as being that event that they optimize for, because then at least there's some fairly strong intent to actually purchase a subscription. This kind of concept of identifying and testing early indicators of propensity to subscribe is called signal testing. And it's something which I think is increasingly important as we go into this kind of post-IDFA, much harder to track kind of scenario. With iOS 14, it's not even going to be possible to send subscription events or trial events at a user level for the majority of users, since they won't have opted into tracking. And so they're only going to be measured on an aggregate basis with a 6-bit conversion value, which is not actually a lot of room to send a lot of information. And it's not going to be sent in real time. It's going to have an arbitrary delay on it. So for many reasons, this is going to become more tricky. Now, Eric Seufert from Mobile Dev Memo has written some great content around what this means for marketers, but essentially it means that we're going to have to work harder to identify the early stage predictors of conversion and find ways to encode these signals into 6 bits by calculating compound event values that score user behavior based on its value rather than sending every event like we're typically doing now. Fortunately, there's a framework for this which I co-developed with CleverTap, which is called the Aic Framework. So it essentially mandates that user events be stratified into 3 buckets or layers of increasing value. We call these acknowledgement for the lowest intent and hence lowest value, interest for the high intent but not a purchase, and conversion, typically the purchase or another core action of the highest value. This framework already forces people who are using it to consider like what events are most valuable and to sort of stratify them, in this case into 3 strata, which is puts you well on the way to actually optimizing your acquisition in a post IDFA world, because you're already essentially creating compound engagement scores, if you like. So you already have a signal of like when you have high value actions occurring. You could look at, for example, how many actions in the interest and conversion layers are happening within that conversion window. And more actions in these layers would give you a higher score in your compound score that you're creating. So this is going to be a very helpful framework for post iOS 14 acquisition optimization. So moving on to thinking about how to measure subscription revenues. There's quite a bit to it, actually. When you start to actually factor in things like cancellations and refunds, as well as variable length subscriptions, potentially you're going to be offering different prices of subscription to different people, which I'm going to get onto in a moment. You've really got like quite a few variables there. There are some solutions out there which really are helping companies stay on top of this stuff and to do like in-depth subscription analytics. You can build it yourself, but there's tools like Revenue Cat and Purchasely out there, which are doing a good job of solving some of that complexity. You'll need to optimize your paywall, or you certainly personalizing your paywall for different user segments. We typically see significant uplift personalizing your segments rather than going with a one-size-fits-all approach. Push different benefits, but also different pricing to users depending on the segmentation that you apply. And when you're thinking about that segmentation, There are some obvious ones like geography, what country or maybe even what city they're in, device information, Android versus iOS, but also model of device, high-end devices, likely the user has more spending power than if they're on a super shitty old smartphone. But you can also think about, segmenting and changing your subscription upsell approach based on things like acquisition source, maybe offering a different offer to people who come in from Facebook and TikTok adverts versus those who discover your app organically. You might want to also align your messaging closely with the ad campaigns that you're running on those networks to really kind of increase the chance that the user feels like the app and the subscription is right for them, because you're really speaking the same language as you did in the advert. And figure out the sweet spot for discounts. The theme here really, the recurring theme in what I'm saying here, is that you're going to leave a ton of cash on the table if you treat all users equally. Users are not equal in their willingness to pay or their ability to pay for subscriptions. So you should use data to optimize which offers are shown to users and when. Start high and then drop prices for the users who are resisting subscribing. Go in high and then consider offering them a significant discount if they're still around in the app but have resisted the first couple of paywalls. So you can think about upsell and personalization in terms of an escalation based on the level of intent. Here's a quick example from Headspace where we looked at different kind of content that the user was accessing in the free tier. In this case, we looked at users who were accessing the sleep content within the app. So they were using the sleep meditations and sleep sounds to help them get off to sleep. And we ran an experiment to see if we could increase the conversion to subscription by customizing the paywall, like first of all driving them to the paywall with a sleep-centric messaging, and then even on the paywall itself, referencing the fact that they access this content by talking about sleep as one of the key benefits of the subscription. And we did indeed see a significant increase in subscriptions by doing this kind of personalization. And you can do this for every different kind of intent that the user is showing. So it doesn't have to be just focused on one particular area. When you're thinking about increasing subscription revenue, across the whole life cycle, you want to also think about how you can really sort of engage users throughout the life cycle. It's not just about getting them into a subscription in the first place, but you want to be able to provide kind of regular, relevant content that's going to keep them engaged over the long term. Here's an example from SoundCloud. On the way in, we're gathering that intent information by asking users through an in-app message what kind of genres of music they like, so that we can start populating their experience even before the recommender algorithm can kick in with some curated content that matches their tastes. We found that boosted subscriptions quite a bit within the first few days. But then ongoing, you want to think about things like regular push notifications, pushing content, or if it's not a content app, maybe you're sort of just trying to build a habit over the long term, trying to get people into a regular routine and tap into their routine to help them keep going, and keep using the app, because you want them to keep resubscribing, or not actually resubscribing, but just not canceling at the end of every term, whether that's a month or a year. You want to make sure that you're minimizing churn. So this becomes also very important. But just speaking about lifetime, my sort of final point is you could do it like Calm and offer a lifetime subscription. Now, you'd be surprised how many people will actually pay for one of these, even at like ridiculous prices like $300 or $400. Definitely it's not the majority of users, but there's a couple of reasons why you might want to offer it. Like, first of all, there's no real harm. It can make the regular subscriptions look a lot cheaper. So just from a sort of price comparison point of view, you might get some benefit there. But also some users will buy it. Some people are not even paying their phone bill. So always worth throwing in a lifetime option would be my sort of cheap trick recommendation. Cool. I think that's about it for my 15 minutes. Just want to finish off by saying that feature hiring for subscription optimization experts, as well as many other open positions. So if you're interested in coming and joining us, feel free to check out our careers page at feature.com. Thank you. Now, while we see a huge gold rush for subscription apps, one app that's really innovating in the music streaming space is Treble. It's an app that's making music accessible to those who perhaps can't afford an expensive subscription by offering a subscription quality service with an ad-funded monetization model. Something like 90% of the world's 3.5 billion smartphone owners don't pay for music. So Treble is really an app for the mainstream. Super cool. Up next we have Corey Jones, co-founder and head of music at Treble, in a fireside chat.